I want to thank you all for coming today, for being engaged in a group like this that is interested in providing you the latest and greatest information and as it affects you and your community. I want to thank our commissioners. I want to thank Awana for the great partnership that Cobb DOT has with Senior Services. And again, we're very, very excited and glad to be here with you today. So just to talk about what I'm going to talk about, in November, the board has asked the department to put together a referendum, a transit referendum for your consideration. That will take the form of a vote that ultimately the voters of Cobb County will have the final say on whether or not that gets funded or it does not. And my goal today, and my goal really for the year as it relates to this, is to make sure that you have the information of what that means. Okay, what that means in terms of how it gets funded, and then should it get funded, what those projects look like, when you can expect to see those projects, and what impact that is, very specifically today, what impact that may have to senior citizens. Just by way of update, right now when you go and buy anything, you pay a 6% sales tax. Of that 6%, 4% goes to the state, and that funds operations through the state government. The county does not see that. 1% goes to the Board of Education, to the Cobb County School District, to fund their general SPLOST program, and that funds schools and things and educational facilities, and that is handled by the Cobb County Board of Education. 1% goes to the general Cobb County SPLOST. And that's both for the unincorporated county as well as each of our 6 cities as it stands today. Mableton came on after the current SPLOST was approved. That's why it's 6 and not 7. And that funds capital projects. Currently, that SPLOST lasts for a 6-year time frame and is going towards things like primarily going towards resurfacing, intersection projects, sidewalks, but also libraries and public safety and projects like that. And then within each of the cities, each of those cities has a similar list of capital projects that is funded through that program. So again, currently Cobb County is at a 6% sales tax. What this referendum would do would take us from a 6% to 7%. And for the purposes of funding transit improvements throughout the county. And again, my goal here today is to just talk to you about what that looks like, what kinds of projects are included, and what time frame you might be able to expect to see that should that program be approved. So now that I've talked about what I'm going to talk about, I will now talk about it and provide you an overview of my presentation. It starts off, 2023 was a year of engaging with the public. So we met with all of the cities and various groups throughout the county to develop a vision for what this program of projects should entail. Some of that background and outreach I'll talk about, as well as the key connections that would be provided through this referendum, this program of projects. And then some additional considerations just to help you be well informed for that ballot question in November. In terms of what the goal and the vision of these projects was, it was in order to build connectivity to promote a thriving community for all. And that's all areas of the county, all different backgrounds and abilities to drive and get around, but just focusing in on connectivity to promote a thriving community for all. And then more specifically, the goal of the projects is to enhance the options in terms of mobility, providing connectivity to jobs, housing choices, and other key destinations, lowering transportation costs anywhere that we could for households, providing innovative solutions for safe and efficient travel, and then supporting a thriving future for Cobb County. You heard my background. I am an engineer, a civil engineer, so I do want to make sure that I state my references in this, and these 3 sources are where those projects came from. This was not Cobb County staff sitting around throwing darts at the wall. These were based on pretty significant background of planning and outreach and technical analysis to develop this program of projects from 3 different sources. The first is our planning foundation, and that is the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. That is that document that you see there on the left. That document starts with an analysis of where we are today in terms of our transportation system, population, and employment, projects out to look at how that population will grow, how that employment will change. Roughly, we're looking at a 20 to 30% increase in population and employment over the next 30 years. With that growth in population employment, there will be some very real demands on the transportation system. And so this document put together recommendations, and they are multimodal recommendations, meaning that they cover all different types of transportation improvement projects that are necessary in order to address the growth that's expected within Cobb County. And that growth is not the same in every part of the county. It's not the same in every bracket of demographics. Specific to seniors, that population as a percentage will double from 11% to 22% and then triple as a total number. So significant growth in the senior population, as well as we're seeing significant growth, and if you've driven by it, you've seen it, significant growth at Kennesaw State University, which is now the second largest university in the state of Georgia. So that growth is not consistent across all of Cobb County, and it is in pockets and within different parts of demographics. Additionally, over this last year, the Cobb County Board of Commissioners has approved a strategic plan, which includes some very specific strategies that the board has adopted for staff to pursue in order to meet the strategic vision of the county. And that is more broad than just transportation. There is a small section on transportation, but does cover the vision and goals of the Cobb County Board of Commissioners. And then finally, there was some dedicated engagement that was utilized in order to help to refine the program of projects that you see here today. So I've talked about a little bit of the background of that, and then talking through what these projects would provide. Here are a few of those key connections. So direct connections into 3 different MARTA stations, and that is on going from west to east is H.E. Holmes, Art Center, in Dunwoody, there in the perimeter area. It provides 14 countywide microtransit zones. I'll speak about what that means here in just a moment, but this was in order to be context sensitive to different parts of Cobb County look different, so the transportation and transit options in those areas needs to look different as well. All 7 cities within Cobb County are provided direct fixed route transit connections, as well as each of the 3 community improvement districts, which will take care of the centralized employment and healthcare centers. Of course, the Battery, I spoke about Kennesaw State University. Of course, there are other higher education institutions when we think of Chattahoochee Tech, Life University, and others throughout the county and the region. And then one of the key destinations that we've heard a lot about is to the airport. The breakdown of the projects, I will not ask you or quiz you on this later, but this just provides a taste of how the funding is being allocated throughout that program, but I will speak to these each individually. First section is high capacity transit. If we think of it like a tent, these would be the tent posts. The core skeleton of the transit system that's being proposed is something called bus rapid transit. Now, if you're like me, the first time I heard about bus rapid transit, I thought, I know what that is. It's buses that are rapid. Because I've seen a bus, I've been on a bus, I understand what that is, and rapid, I know what that word means. But really, what we've seen across the country and really across the world is bus rapid transit is really the new mode that is coming online in terms of high capacity. And high capacity meaning traditionally we think of rail, but really that the industry has gone more towards bus rapid transit given its lower costs and faster delivery timeframes. So to talk about what it is, just very briefly, the difference between kind of a typical fixed route, hop on a bus at a stop and then go to the next stop and then get off, and bus rapid transit really comes down to the nodes and the segments. So the nodes being those stops, those stations, really have more of the look and feel like a train station. So it is level boarding, it's off-board fare collection so that you're getting on and the amenities look and feel much more like a rail system than a typical bus stop. You have passenger information of the next vehicle arrives in X minutes, and your time to destination is however many minutes it might be to that final destination. So that's in the segments, and then in the nodes. And then in terms of the segments, the connections between those stations, the difference between kind of a typical bus and bus rapid transit is dedicated lanes. And by having dedicated lanes, it offers the ability to have a competitive trip and offer production times, kind of travel times very similar to rail, because it is in a dedicated lane and not subject to traffic congestion. Is able to get you between point A and point B much quicker. I had a map up there earlier, and would be glad to provide that. And actually, a lot of that information is on our website. To just overview those connections, it's primarily along the Northwest Corridor and then into the South Cobb area and into HE Homes. So along generally the 41 corridor connecting between Kennesaw State University, downtown Marietta, and the Marietta campus of KSU, and then into the Battery and then into Art Center, and then a connection from Marietta into the South Cobb area near Cobb General Hospital, in through Mableton to HE Homes are the primary connections that are proposed with high capacity transit. Next, if BRT is the tent posts, the microtransit service is really the canvas that covers that tent. And again, if we look at transit across the country, the biggest challenge has been first and last mile connectivity. Sure, it's great that you have a bus line or you have this transit system, but I can't get to it. I can't walk 2 miles to be able to get to that stop. Or perhaps my trip where I need to go to just get to the grocery store is 3 or 4 miles away, and it doesn't make sense to hop on a bus, to walk so far, to hop on a bus, to then walk again to your final destination. And what microtransit does, just to talk about what it is very, very briefly, is, again, it divides the county up into 14 different operating zones. Within that zone, there are 2 different types of trips that are possible. The first is a curb-to-curb trip within that zone. So again, imagine with me, and I'll use the example of my grandmother who lived in Memphis all of her life. She ended up staying independent well into her 90s, but could not drive. The grocery store was just a few miles away and required my aunt to go pick her up to take her to the grocery store for her weekly trip. What microtransit provides is the option of someone that would prefer or does not have that family support to be able to hail a ride either through a phone call or through an app like Uber or Lyft, take you to that final destination and then back again. Again, a curb-to-curb trip within all of those zones within Cobb County. The second type of trip that would be available with this system is a curb-to-transit trip. So take, for example, someone that is in the, let's say in the area where we are, the Marietta microtransit zone, that desires to get to the Battery, to go to a ball game. They would be able to, again, get a ride that takes them from here to the transit system, where they can hop on that bus rapid transit system and drops them right into the Cumberland area, watch the baseball game, and then make that return trip after the game is complete. So 2 different types of services. Again, it is a public transit service, or would be a public transit service. And so just a few notes about that are a little bit different than, say, Uber and Lyft. So Uber and Lyft are really softwares. They do not employ drivers. They do not actually have a fleet of vehicles. It's really a mobile app that connects drivers and riders together. And it works great for what it does. But what this does is a public transit trip. So the drivers have all been vetted to make sure that they are appropriate to be transporting the general public, as well as the vehicles, having gone through some very rigorous inspections to make sure that those vehicles are safe. And then it is a shared trip. So it may be that it's still an A to B trip, but it might go A to C to B. So it might pick me up and then pick up Awana and then drop me off and then drop off Awana as an example. And then local rapid and other, so this is kind of that other category, is when we compare, and I have a comparison map here in a little bit, when we compare the existing system to what the system would be if approved, a pretty significant expansion of that system. Right now, there's not fixed route service into the Powder Springs and Austell area. There is not fixed route service into the East Cobb area or into Acworth, so it does expand and then provide higher frequency service for those typical fixed route services. And in doing so, actually expand the paratransit service area, which brings me to this slide that is very specific to mobility outside of a typical bus. And what this program would provide is 3 different resources, particularly as I think about senior mobility, provides three different resources. An expansion of the paratransit service area. I'll talk about each of these individually. But expansion of paratransit service, transportation voucher program expansion, as well as microtransit service. So I've already spoken about microtransit there. I'll talk about the other 2. So the first is paratransit service. So you may be familiar, maybe intimately familiar with the vehicle there on the left that you see. That is a picture of our Cobb Link paratransit vehicles. And they only operate around our existing bus service. So as those fixed route lines expand, so does that paratransit service. And what that service requires is that you are certified as by your doctor or some other provider as being a paratransit eligible rider. Once you are certified, then it is that curb-to-curb trip within that zone through our paratransit service. And this is federally required and something that we do today, but would expand with an expansion of the system. So would that service area expand as well. So that then expands the opportunity for anyone that wants to make a trip within that kind of yellowish zone would be able to make that trip just by calling paratransit and then going between their origin and destination. And then I'll speak about the transportation voucher program. So there is a voucher program today where $10 gets you $100 worth of vouchers. And that amount is capped based on some particular circumstances. And we've seen great success with that program. That program covers those paratransit riders outside of that zone. So if you are outside of the existing paratransit system, you are eligible for transportation vouchers. And Awana's here. We partner very closely with Senior Services on that program. Would be glad to talk about that in more detail if anyone has any questions about that. But that program is limited in terms of it does cap out at a certain amount. And as we see and we've seen this from our private providers who actually take those vouchers, those costs have increased. So $100 of vouchers doesn't stretch as far as $100 of vouchers used to stretch. So this would allow an expansion of that of that voucher program to make sure that those that depend on the system most have the opportunity to get where they need to get to. Local rapid and other service enhancements. Again, this just shows an overall map showing the expansion of the system as well as overlaying the microtransit zones. And then the other thing to note here is the use and leveraging of technology to the greatest extent. Right now, we are a very small team on the transit side. Cobb DOT does everything transportation in the county, from traffic operations to projects to we have the airport and the transit system. Our transit team is very small, and really they are primarily an oversight of a contractor that operates our transit system. And in order to make sure that we are monitoring it in real time, taking some of the successes that we've had with our traffic management center, which is just down here at County Services down the street, which has a TV that is really the size of this stage where we can monitor traffic, make changes in real time, and address events as they are occurring. Take some of those successes and apply it to the transit system where we can monitor and manage that transit system in real time to make sure it is safe, effective, and comfortable for all of our customers. So now for these next few slides, I've talked about the amount of the program. Now it serves a reason I should talk about the duration. So the duration is 30 years, which is a very long time. The reason for that time frame, and really that was established by the legislature in Atlanta, that said a 5-year program or a 6-year program like our typical SPLOST are really effective for capital projects. Because you can plan out that time frame, you understand a really solid revenue projection, you're able to estimate those projects, you're able to deliver those projects within that time frame plus a little bit. But again, our current SPLOST programs, our current sales tax programs, the two that the county has, the county in general, are limited to only capital. When we look at transit is very operational heavy. So there are some capital projects that you've heard me speak about, but once those BRT lines are created or those buses are purchased, it needs to then be able to operate. And what that time frame does is it allows transit agencies to be able to have that confidence of sustainable funding for the long term. So we felt it important, again, to make sure that you are as well informed as you can be to demonstrate what the phasing of the program would be if approved. And so we've broken that down into short, medium, and long-term projections, where we've looked at the revenue projections, the cost projections, to be able to demonstrate how that rollout would be, again, should it be approved. First, that we see the first item there, again, if you remember me speaking about microtransit, this provides microtransit coverage in the first 5 years of all 7 cities within Cobb County. An expansion of our routes, which then would bring that expansion of paratransit, and some of that beginning work on the BRT system, where staff would begin the planning, engineering, right-of-way acquisition, utility coordination necessary to get ready to go ahead and build those BRT systems. Within that next 5 year, that microtransit system has gone countywide. So this is looking at the first 10 years of the program. Many of those BRT routes are coming online. You heard me speak about those connections. Those connections are shown in the thick red lines. Those connections would come online within those first 10 years. Again, microtransit throughout and local bus enhancements through that time frame. And then over that final 20 years, it would be really just filling out the system, delivering the final BRT connection, which I believe was between Marietta and South Cobb, and the final expansions to a few of the routes throughout the county. And just to then be able to take a step back and compare our existing system on the left to the system as it would be should it be approved by the voters, and ultimately, again, you all will have that final say. It just demonstrates, and the colors are important. Again, those colors are the 14 different microtransit zones. And then the different types of system offerings that would be available from the typical fixed route that is in the green, the rapid that is in the yellow, that is systems that we already have in place, but this does expand those, to then the BRT in the dark red. I spoke about how Cobb DOT is multimodal in terms of what we do. We do everything from sidewalks and trails to intersection improvements, grade separations, to transit and airport. We do a little bit of everything. And looking at this, and we have some very specific requirements by law, but the definition of transit project also includes recognizing the importance of being able to access the system. A system is only as good as people are able to get to it. So accessibility of the system and operations of the system. And so what this program of projects does is it takes a portion of the funds and it applies it to those two purposes. And I'll speak about each of those just very briefly. First, in terms of access, and you see here trails, bridges, bike ped improvements. This is those improvements necessary to make sure someone can walk or bike or take some other means to get to the system. An example of this is we have done some of the initial planning work for the Austell-Powder Springs Trail that connects those two cities and provides connections to the Silver Comet Trail. Additionally, over the life of the program, there is projected to be a new fixed route that connects those cities as well. So this program would provide funding to deliver that trail and be able to connect it, both for those future potential transit users, as well as for anyone that lives in those communities. In terms of transit operations, this was actually one of the questions that I got even before I started, is there were some previous planning efforts that were done that were very narrowly focused on transit that showed negative impacts to the operations of traffic. And so what this program does is it provides funding for those operational improvements to make sure that it not only does no harm, but also provides an enhancement to traffic operations. So for example, the Cobb Parkway at Windy Hill intersection, where we have planned and developed a plan for a grade separation to improve one of the most congested intersections in the Metro Atlanta region, also has a planned BRT through that area. We would be able to provide and deliver that grade separation through this program in addition to the BRT. So the program of projects considers those enhancements that are necessary as the BRT comes online to improve the operations of the transit and the other traffic in that area, while also providing the ability to expand the accessibility and overall operations of traffic throughout the county as well. And the other note to this is, per our traditional SPLOST, those funds get divided up based on population with each of the cities. And we have taken that same analysis and approach to these transit supportive projects to partner with the cities. And we have spoken with them to identify what are some of those critical improvements that can be delivered concurrently with this program. So just a quick summary of what this program of projects provides is 100% coverage, particularly due to that microtransit coverage, but coverage throughout the county with focus on access to jobs, coverage of the vulnerable populations, a goal of reducing the demand of parking in key parking demands in business districts, alternatives to congestion and addressing the growth of the county. And also a note that just currently our transit system is funded through property tax. In part, it's property tax, fares collected, and federal grants that we receive. This would transfer those local funding responsibilities that are just borne by the residents of Cobb County to residents and visitors through a sales tax, so that visitors to Cobb County would also participate in the program. In terms of what we've done and what is ahead of us in order to prepare this and get this to the ballot, thus far the board has begun some of the necessary coordination with some of the alphabet soup agencies that we work with. First, there is the Atlanta Transit Link Authority, which is a state governmental authority that has appointees from a number of state representatives and districts that has oversight of regional transit in the Metro Atlanta area. They hold the ARTP, which is a regional transit plan. So the board has requested an update there. We will continue that coordination. There's some meeting with the municipalities coming up, and ultimately the board will authorize to hold that referendum. And throughout, we will be providing presentations like this, just to make sure that when folks see that ballot question, that they understand that if they click yes, these are the types of things that they could expect to see. And that concludes, I know I had till like 1 o'clock, but I didn't think y'all wanted to hear me for 2 hours. So that concludes my remarks.
If the transportation SPLOST is approved, when can we expect to see transportation projects to be available? When will it be available after the, that's a good,
That'll work. So in terms of the when, and I can go back to that particular slide, the projects would begin to be delivered as soon as possible. And that goes to what our track record has been with SPLOST, is once the voters have approved it, we feel that there is an obligation within our department to deliver very quickly. And so we see many of the microtransit zones and the operational improvements, the accessibility improvements would begin to be delivered as soon as collections begin. And this slide demonstrates what some of those improvements would be within that first 5 years.
What kind of ridership do you expect from this program? What kind of ridership do you expect?
Sure. So I'll speak in terms of coverage. Ultimately, ridership is a choice. Much like the referendum is a choice, ridership is a choice to utilize the system. I did make note of some of the more specific coverage. I mentioned that the county would be 100% covered with what it is today. And that is just as we compare to what the system is today. Right now, about 24% of the population is covered within walking distance of transit, which is about 42% of our jobs, so a little bit higher in terms of employment. In terms of seniors, about 18% of the population is currently covered within walking distance of fixed route transit. So a pretty significant expansion in the opportunity. And then ultimately, it would be a choice for the voters and then for the riders on utilizing the system once approved.
The Cobb County bus system was discontinued due to lack of ridership. Why start the buses again?
I'm not sure I understand. The Cobb County, the transit system does operate today, so I'm not sure.
It was discontinued due to lack of ridership. Maybe some of the routes.
Were some of the routes discontinued?
So there were some routes in the East Cobb area that were discontinued due to some budget cuts. That precedes my time frame, so I don't have context on that.
Is on demand provided by Cobb buses or Lyft or Uber? You don't provide on-demand services to your client.
So there's a small area of on-demand, and actually we are taking some here. I'll show just to speak about some of the current and then what it would look like with this. So if we look at the network comparison, on the left you'll notice the existing Flex system. That system was developed because of some of the transit routes that existed previously that were, again, removed due to some budget constraints. Each of those routes operates independently, and you notice the areas of those are very small and disconnected. Each one operates independent of one another. The microtransit zones, you'll notice on the right side, really combine those areas into more cohesive areas of operation. And currently, we are in the process of procuring for a system, or a microtransit demonstration area, roughly in the area of the purple, yellow, and teal, kind of the 1, 2, and 5 around the South Cobb, Powder Springs area. And that would be provided by a third party. So there are vendors that come, they bring vehicles and drivers that satisfy the various regulations, requirements of a microtransit system. And so it would not be Uber or Lyft, because again, those are just software companies essentially. It would be, they would provide the drivers and the vehicles. It would be a third party, but dedicated with experience on microtransit.
A question about microtransit service. It is supposed to provide door-to-door service for anywhere which starts and ends in the county, or is it supposed to hook up with other expanded mass transit service in this that you would build with the transit tax? Did you big question? Once again, and whoever read this question is welcome to clarify. Regarding microtransit service, it is supposed to provide door-to-door service for anywhere which starts and ends in the county, or is it supposed to hook up with expanded mass transit? Right. Okay.
So just to explain that, and this again is probably the right graphic to explain that for, it is not point to point within anywhere in Cobb County. So a microtransit system does not take someone, say, from Ackworth to Six Flags. It provides a curb-to-curb trip within each of those zones individually. Now, if the end point, again, if that final destination is outside of that zone, then there is a transfer to the transit system to be able to make that final trip. So, and the goal there is to keep those microtransit zones very tight in terms of the ability to be efficient and effective, so that those vehicles circulate within that zone, and then anything outside of that zone is a transfer to the fixed route system.
Microtransit is supposed to, is point to point. It's point to point. It is very expensive. Can you tell us how much the service will cost? You know, the other part of the question is, you have Flex currently. Can you tell us how much Flex costs to compute?
I don't have those numbers with me, but I'd be glad to provide them. I'll hang around after I've got cards. I'd be glad to provide both of those numbers.
Why is this proposal pursued when there's no measurable demand?
So I'll leave this to ultimately the Board of Commissioners to answer questions on kind of the direction there, but it just very specifically to transportation, it is looking at where we are today in terms of population employment and where we're growing to, and a desire to provide increased and more effective connectivity throughout the region.
One writes, we will be dead. You could expect me. We will be dead in 30 years. I thought we need a little comic relief or a little roaches. Okay. It's not always. Why not just go microtransit, avoiding most of capital investment projects?
That's a great question, and I'll take that and talk about not just microtransit, but the modes as they're proposed. You'll notice there's, and this was actually a question that we got at another meeting, is there's no fixed route transit in, say, West Cobb, or you'll kind of pick an area. Why not? And so as we've developed these plans, the goal with each of these different systems, right? If we think of microtransit being coverage, more specifically, and then BRT being that point-to-point, as fast as you can transit. Very, very different in terms of what they do. The goal with each of these modes and the transit planning, and I'm not a transit planner, but know enough to be dangerous. The goal with each of these modes is to match the context in which they exist. So for example, those BRT corridors, you'll notice there's existing density there. There's a desire for more density in some of those areas. When you think of Town Center and Cumberland, where there are the economic engines and employment areas, primary employment areas of the county. And so in areas like that, where there's existing and future density, there's a better operations of that BRT system. However, if we look out into the more residential areas, you'll note that fixed route transit is not there. And that is really just a function of a bus line in highly residential areas is not typically successful. And so those microtransit areas are there to be able to provide coverage for those, particularly those that need that service of just being able to get to work or to grocery or to medical, but by right-sizing the transit recommendations in each of those areas.
Why are taxes included for road maintenance, which should always be in regular fiscal budget?
Sure, great question. So none of these projects that are proposed in terms of operations on this slide, in terms of operational improvements or accessibility improvements, are maintenance related. So right now, our capital maintenance is coming primarily 95+% is coming from SPLOST, and that's where we see our resurfacing, our bridge replacements, our traffic signal replacements, our drainage, which is honestly our biggest infrastructure challenge right now. That's where those are being taken care of. These would all be operational improvements. These would be capacity adding or accessibility adding type projects.
You say right now, it only covers 18% of seniors door to door. What percent of seniors do you project will be covered? And you tell?
So it would be 100% of seniors would be covered with when we look at the three different systems that we talked about. And there would be some overlap, but honestly, the needs of each individual are very different. So the covered area that you see there is the paratransit coverage, but remember there's also microtransit and the voucher program that provide 100% coverage of the county and accessibility to one or more of each of these for everyone, again, should it be approved by the voters.
So can I ask, for seniors a big part of your planning, how much do they, for seniors a big part of your planning, how much should we talk about seniors in developing this program?
Oh, absolutely, and it's a great question. So the seniors were a very heavy part of this, because as we look at, again, just what I spoke about, the significant growth, the area where the county will see the highest increase in demographics is in the senior population by far. And so that was a very specific and dedicated emphasis in the planning of these program projects.
Just as Zoom business technology is fast replacing face-to-face, buses will be much less viable over a 30-year span, if not obsolete. In other words, would this plan be obsolete in 30 years?
Yeah.
So there's some opinion in there. I'll leave that as it is. But in terms of the program of projects and where we see technology going, and really we're seeing advancements in technology in 3 areas: connected vehicles, electric vehicles, and autonomous vehicles. This program of projects really looks very heavily at those, particularly that first one of connected vehicles, to make sure that those vehicles are connected to the infrastructure. And that's where we're seeing a lot of that growth and opportunity of making sure that that real-time information is used to better manage the travel and traffic demand throughout the region. There is some consideration of autonomous. I know the Cumberland CID has been looking heavily at autonomous, and that still has a ways to go. But what we feel very confident about in terms of our planning, and certainly we are open-handed with, there are things that we do not know. But what we're very confident about is there will always be a need to connect people between where they live and their medical appointments, to their jobs, to places of entertainment. And the goal of this program is to be very specific so that the voters know what they're voting on. So that we can show that 5-year plan to show, should this be approved, here's what gets delivered, but also flexible enough, because again, there are things that I don't know, and I'm very open with that fact. So providing that flexibility, that within the constraints of what the voters approved, there are the ability to flex to perhaps it's technology, perhaps it's where population and employment are projected, and to be able to address that as it comes, and that comes through programmatic areas. But again, we do anticipate the need for people to have solid connectivity today, tomorrow, and into the future.
Connect Cobb study exposes the difficulty in retrofitting something into BRT. In retrofitting BRT into a busy corridor without making mobility worse. As you mentioned, you're working on fixes to overcome or offset some of these obstacles to mobility, but the elimination of the middle left turn lane is unfixable. How will businesses along Cobb Parkway be affected by obstructed access and property takings?
Sure. A lot in that question, so I'll unpack it. Hopefully I hit all the different areas. In transportation, so I'll take y'all to school with me for just, if you'll indulge me, for just like this long. In transportation, there is a balance between mobility and accessibility. So, right, we see that our subdivision roads are very accessible. There's a driveway every 100, 200 feet, right? But then on the other end of the spectrum is the mobility side. So when we look at, say, Interstate 75, there are just those interchanges. There's no direct access to businesses. And then all of our other roads fall somewhere on that continuum, where it's either very high on accessibility or very high on mobility. And so when we look at corridors like Cobb Parkway and look at the traffic demand, again, just strictly traffic demand, the mobility and accessibility are in conflict today. where there is a heavy desire for throughput when we look at congestion at intersections like Cobb Parkway at Windy Hill or other major intersections along the corridor, and then a desire and a necessity to be able to access some of those businesses, the car dealerships and other shopping centers up and down Cobb Parkway. So that balance is one that we have to take very seriously and spend a lot of time making sure that we consider exactly how that's done. Some of the ways that's been done is through signalized U-turns to make sure that those right turns can happen in the business. That helps to balance that accessibility and mobility. Ultimately, the different parts of Cobb Parkway are going to have different answers to that. What we have done for these projects, because we've not gone down and spent the time, money, and effort without the voter approval to exactly design out every single one of these. And so during that planning and engineering process, our technical analysis to look at where on that spectrum, that continuum, we should fall, where does that corridor look like? Number one, so identifying what the answer is, and that answer will be different on the parts of Cobb Parkway in Marietta compared to the parts of Cobb Parkway even in Cumberland. So understanding that, having heavy public involvement through that, engaging with those that drive through there, those that have businesses there. And then finally, and most importantly, is what this program of projects does in comparison to Connect Cobb of, goodness, is that 12 years ago now? Many years ago, is it provides a dedicated funding source to be able to take care of those issues. So that previous planning study really just narrowly focused on BRT, and so provided funding just for that BRT and created some issues with retrofitting because of what cannot happen or what was not available for funding. This program does provide funding to be able to address those issues, to do things like, again, Cobb Parkway at Windy Hill grade separation, to make sure that the mobility side of it is not impacted. And again, that accessibility question is really a driveway by driveway question up and down any of these corridors.
If the transit tax is passed, will that result in the end of the current subsidy for bus service from the general fund? And will that savings result in a reduction of the millage rate? It's a tough audience.
Keep them coming. I can answer the first part. I do not have responsibility to answer the second part. The second part is really for your Board of Commissioners to answer. What I will say, though, is this referendum fully funds the local contribution to transit over the full duration. So it is a fiscally constrained program of projects that, again, takes all of the local funding necessary to expand and operate the transit system, and it funds it there. Now, that does take and make available the county's general fund contribution to transit. Ultimately, that is the consideration and question for the Board of Commissioners of what they will do with that, and it's really not for me to answer.